The stars above Ilithia shimmered like scattered diamonds, but the planet below was quiet. Too quiet. Mist hung over the ancient city, curling around towers of pale crystal, and the wind whispered through empty streets. No sound of laughter or life reached the surface. The palace at the heart of the city rose like a frozen monument, its gates closed, its halls still. Inside, a young woman lay in a bed that seemed to float in a soft glow. Her chest barely rose, her breathing faint, and her skin shone faintly under the pale light. She was Lyria, the princess of Ilithia, and her world was dying along with her. Captain Kale stepped out of his ship, the human craft humming softly behind him. He was tall, with a calm presence, but his eyes carried a mixture of determination and worry. Ilithia had called for help centuries ago, yet no one had answered until now. Kale had volunteered not only because of duty, but because of something deeper. He felt that humans could offer more than medicine or technology. They could offer hope, and perhaps hope was exactly what this princess needed. The palace doors opened before him, though no hand touched them. It was as if the building itself had been waiting. Kale walked inside carefully, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall. Alien statues lined the walls, their faces unreadable but full of silent grief. The air smelled faintly of metal and earth, a strange mix that made him pause. In the center of the palace, Lyria lay surrounded by machines and glowing crystals, delicate tubes and wires snaking around her. She looked fragile, almost unreal, like a dream too precious to touch. An elderly alien attendant stepped forward. Her skin shimmered like silver under the light, and her eyes were deep pools of sorrow. "She is fading," the elder said softly, her voice trembling. "No healer has been able to reach her for years. Do you think your people can succeed where we failed?" Kale knelt beside the bed, studying Lyria. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he placed a hand lightly on the edge of the bed, feeling the faint pulse of life. It was weaker than any human life he had known, but it was there, stubborn and delicate. "I don't know if I can," he admitted, "but I can try. Sometimes it is not only medicine that heals. Sometimes it is the care and courage behind the medicine. Sometimes it is the touch of life itself." The elder watched him with a mixture of hope and doubt. "The soul fades first," she whispered. "Her body is held by crystal energy, but her spirit has begun to drift. If her soul is lost, there will be no return." Kale nodded, his gaze steady on Lyria. He knew then that this was no ordinary mission. This was not about vaccines or machines or cures. This was about reaching something invisible, something fragile, something that might not even belong to science. He had to reach her soul. He began slowly, speaking in soft tones, telling stories of Earth, the green forests, the vast oceans, the laughter of children. He described storms and sunsets, songs sung by people long gone, and the warmth of touch between friends and family. His voice was calm but firm, carrying care and respect across the quiet hall. Lyria's chest stirred slightly and her eyelids twitched, but it was not enough. Yet even that tiny movement gave Kale a spark of hope. Days passed and Kale worked tirelessly. He connected sensors, ran tests, and meditated beside her, trying to sense the faint energy of her being. Each day the palace seemed to listen with him. Sometimes the crystals hummed softly in response, and sometimes the wind carried faint echoes of his words. The attendants began to linger near him, drawn by his persistence and his courage. They whispered among themselves, no longer skeptical but cautious, watching as the human who dared to touch the fading soul refused to give up. At night, Kale would sit beside Lyria, placing his hand near hers without touching, speaking softly into the stillness. He felt an invisible barrier, a thin veil separating him from her spirit. Sometimes he thought he sensed a flicker, a tiny spark of recognition, but it disappeared almost immediately. He refused to be discouraged. The princess might be silent, her soul might be weak, but life, he knew, had a stubborn way of clinging to those who deserved it most. One evening, as the pale light of Ilithia's twin moons reflected on the crystal walls, Kale reached out carefully, brushing his fingertips against Lyria's hand. It was a gentle touch, almost a whisper. The moment his skin met hers, the palace seemed to sigh. Her fingers twitched more noticeably, and a faint color returned to her cheeks. Kyle held his breath, feeling a connection, fragile but undeniable. For the first time, he knew that hope was no longer just an idea. It was real, waiting to awaken. And somewhere deep inside Lyria, in the fading corners of her soul, a spark stirred. Kale sat beside Lyria as the pale glow of Alethia's moons bathed the room in silver light. The faint spark of life he had felt the night before had not disappeared, but it had not grown stronger either. He knew awakening her soul would take more than science. It would take patience, care, and something deeper than what machines could measure. Her attendants watched quietly, their eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. None dared to touch her, yet all seemed to sense that the human sitting beside her carried a strange kind of strength. Each day, Kale spoke to her softly, telling stories of Earth and its wonders. He described fields of flowers swaying in the wind, rain falling on crowded city streets, the quiet hum of life at dawn, and the laughter of children playing under the sun. He told her about acts of kindness, bravery, and love, not only from famous humans but from ordinary people as well. Kale spoke as if she could hear every word, even though she did not move or respond. He believed that somewhere in the quiet corners of her fading soul, his words were reaching her little by little. The elder attendant approached one morning, her silver skin glinting softly under the light. She carried a small crystal sphere, warm to the touch. "This is the essence of Alethea," she said. "It holds memories, thoughts, and emotions from centuries of our people. Perhaps it can guide your human energy toward her fading soul." Kale took the sphere carefully, feeling the soft hum of energy within it. He placed it near Lyria's head, close enough to touch but never intrusive. He closed his eyes and tried to synchronize his own life energy with hers, letting warmth and care flow through the crystal. For hours, he sat in silence, feeling her presence as faint vibrations beneath his touch. At times it felt as though she was drifting farther away, lost in endless darkness. Other times he sensed a flicker, a tiny pulse of recognition. He whispered softly, "I am here. You are not alone. You can come back." The first flicker became a second, then a third, and slowly, like the sun rising over a dark world, her soul began to respond to his presence. The attendants watched in awe as Kale worked tirelessly. They whispered among themselves, unsure whether this human's approach was bravery or madness. Some had doubted that any outsider could reach the princess. Yet Kale persisted, ignoring exhaustion, hunger, and the chill of the crystal halls. His care was steady and unwavering, and in it they began to see something unfamiliar. The human spirit, a force that could touch hearts even across worlds. One evening, a subtle change occurred. Lyria's chest rose a little more with each breath. Her fingers twitched as if stretching after a long sleep. Kale's heart quickened, but he did not move hastily. He simply continued, speaking softly and keeping his hand near hers. "You are strong," he said. "You have always been strong. Now let your strength grow again. Let life flow through you." He imagined her soul as a small flame flickering weakly in a dark room. His words were the wind, steady but gentle, coaxing the flame to burn brighter. Kale began to notice small signs of recognition. Sometimes her eyelids would twitch as he spoke. Sometimes a faint shiver would pass through her body. These tiny reactions gave him courage, but he knew the real challenge was deeper. Lyria's soul had been fading for a long time. It was fragile, delicate, and afraid. If he forced her too quickly, it might retreat further into darkness. He had to be patient. He had to reach her gently, without fear or judgment, offering not only hope but trust. The elder attendant placed a hand on Kale's shoulder one night. "You feel it, do you not?" she whispered.
"She is aware of you."
"Not fully, but she senses something different. Something that belongs to another world." Kyle nodded, feeling the truth in her words. It was not just his words or his touch. It was the human essence of care, courage, and persistence that seemed to reach across the gap between worlds. His presence alone was a bridge to her fading soul. As days turned into nights, Kale's connection grew stronger. He learned to listen, not only with his ears but with his heart. He began to sense her emotions, faint and fragmented like echoes in a vast canyon. There was fear, confusion, and pain, but also a flicker of curiosity and hope. He whispered to her as he would to a friend, recounting stories of triumph and survival, of moments when humans faced impossible odds and emerged stronger. His calm, unwavering presence was slowly weaving life back into her being. Then, one quiet night, as Alethea's twin moons cast a gentle glow across the crystal halls, Lyria's fingers twitched more strongly than before. Her eyes moved beneath their lids as if sensing the world again. Kale's hand hovered over hers, trembling slightly, not from fear but from awe. He had seen sparks before, but this time it felt Different. A faint pulse of recognition, a whisper of life that said, though she was still lost in darkness, she was beginning to return. And in that fragile moment, Cale knew with certainty that hope was no longer a dream. It was real, alive, and within reach. Cale felt a subtle shift in the palace as he continued his work. Lyria's pulse had grown stronger and tiny sparks of recognition flared within her soul, yet the palace was no longer entirely quiet. The attendants moved with nervous energy, whispering in low tones. Cale sensed their unease and knew that not all Elythians welcomed the human who dared touch their princess. Some watched him with suspicion, others with awe, but a few carried something darker, doubt and fear that his presence would change everything. One afternoon, while Cale sat beside Lyria, an elder approached, her robes gliding silently across the crystal floor. "Captain Cale," she said, her voice tight with restraint, "not all will accept your methods. Some factions believe a human should never influence the princess. They fear what may come if she awakens under your guidance." Cale looked at her steadily, his hand still hovering near Lyria's. "I understand," he replied, "but she is alive and she deserves a chance. If we do nothing, her soul will fade completely. I am willing to face their fear. My concern is her life, not politics." The elder sighed, her gaze moving to Lyria. "Then proceed carefully. There are those who watch and wait. If they act, it could bring harm to her and to you." As the days passed, Cale continued his patient work. He spoke to Lyria softly, recounting stories of Earth, but now he also began to teach her to imagine life beyond the palace. He described bustling cities, green fields, towering mountains, and rivers that sparkled under the sun. He told her of human friendship, of bonds that survive hardship, and of courage in the face of despair. He felt that each word was a thread, slowly weaving her spirit back into existence. One evening, Cale noticed movement from the shadowed corners of the hall. Figures stepped forward, their armor glinting faintly in the crystal light. They were Elythian guards, but not the ones assigned to protect Lyria. Their expressions were cold, their eyes suspicious. "Captain Cale," the leader said, his voice low and firm, "we do not allow outsiders to manipulate the princess. Step away or face consequences." Cale remained calm. He did not remove his hand from its position near Lyria. But he did not make a sudden move. "She is alive," he said. "I am not harming her. I am helping her. Can you say the same about doing nothing?" The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Cale's presence, calm and unwavering, seemed to fill the room with a quiet strength. Still, the tension was palpable. He realized that awakening Lyria was not only a struggle against her fading soul, but also a challenge against centuries of fear and tradition. He would need patience, wisdom, and courage in equal measure. Night fell and the palace was silent once more. Cale spoke softly to Lyria, recounting a story about a child who survived a great storm, relying only on hope and determination. He imagined her soul as a small flame, flickering and fragile but alive. He whispered encouragements, letting warmth and care flow through his voice. As he spoke, Lyria's fingers twitched slightly and her chest rose a little higher. The faint pulse of life became more steady, more tangible. The elder attendant returned to Cale's side, her eyes filled with cautious hope. "She is responding," she said. "Not fully awake, but she senses you. You are reaching her in ways no one else could." Cale nodded. He felt a connection forming, fragile but undeniable. Each day he learned to listen not only with his ears but with his heart. He sensed her fears, her confusion, and also tiny fragments of curiosity. Lyria's soul was like a delicate melody, quiet and faint, but it responded to his care. He realized that awakening her was not just a task of science or magic. It was a dance between two worlds, a meeting of hearts. Then one morning, a small miracle occurred. Lyria's eyes moved beneath their lids as if sensing the world around her. She did not open them fully, but her awareness of life was growing. Cale's hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from awe. The moment felt sacred, a fragile bridge between life and darkness. Cale whispered gently, "I am here. You are not alone. You can return. You are stronger than you think." He imagined her soul as a tiny ember growing brighter with each word. The palace seemed to hold its breath. Even the attendants leaned closer, watching in silent wonder as a human persisted where generations of Elythians had failed. That night, Cale stayed longer than usual. He did not speak much, He only placed a hand near hers, letting warmth and presence flow. Slowly, Lyria's fingers twitched more noticeably. Her chest rose steadily. A faint color returned to her cheeks. Kale knew that this was only the beginning. Awakening her soul would take time, patience, and unwavering care. But he had crossed the first threshold, and deep within the fragile light of her spirit, a faint recognition began to shine, like the first light of dawn over a world long lost in darkness. Kyle had been at the palace for many days now, and the faint glow of Lyria's soul had grown stronger. Her fingers twitched with small movements, and sometimes her eyes would shift slightly beneath their lids. The human could feel her presence more clearly now, like a soft hum beneath his own heartbeat. Yet he knew the true awakening had not yet come. Her soul remained fragile, as if it balanced on a thread, and any sudden move could shatter the delicate progress he had made. One morning, Kale suggested something new. "Perhaps," he said softly to the elder attendant, "we can combine human and Elythian energy. Together it might help her soul find its own rhythm again." The attendant hesitated but nodded. She retrieved a small crystal disc etched with ancient Elythian symbols. "This holds our energy," she explained. "It can guide life force back to her, but it must be done carefully. Any misuse could harm her." Kyle placed the disc near Lyria's head and closed his eyes. He focused on the warmth within himself, on the rhythm of his heartbeat, and on the care he felt for her. Slowly he let that energy flow, merging with the gentle vibrations from the crystal. The palace seemed to respond. Light shimmered softly along the walls, and a quiet hum resonated from the floors. Lyria's chest moved slightly faster, and her fingers twitched as if reaching for life itself. Hours passed in silence, broken only by Kale's gentle words. "I am here," he whispered. "You can awaken. You can feel again. You are not alone." The attendants watched quietly, holding their breath, afraid to disturb the fragile moment. For the first time, they saw that Kale's human energy, combined with their own, could reach something deeper than machines or medicine ever could. As the ritual continued, a faint warmth spread across Lyria's body. Her eyes flickered beneath their lids more frequently, and the tiniest sigh escaped her lips. Kale smiled faintly, careful not to let excitement rush him. This was delicate work. Her soul was like a tiny flame in the wind, stronger than before but still fragile. Suddenly a warning sounded. Alarms echoed from the outer walls of the palace. Kale opened his eyes to see guards running past, their expressions tense. Rival factions had detected his presence and intended to intervene. Kale remained calm. He gently removed his hand from the disc but kept it close to Lyria. "Stay still," he whispered. "I will protect you." The palace corridors were soon filled with the sound of armored feet. Kale rose, moving swiftly but carefully, ensuring that no sudden shock reached Lyria. The elder attendants murmured anxiously, fearing the confrontation could disrupt the progress they had made. Kale's focus never wavered. He was not only protecting her body but also her soul. Any fear, anger, or violence nearby could threaten the fragile energy he was nurturing. When the rival faction approached, Kyle stood tall. "I mean no harm," he said firmly. "She is alive. She deserves a chance. If you wish to stop me, you must be ready to face what comes from neglecting life itself." The leader of the intruders hesitated, sensing Kale's unwavering presence. His calmness, his courage, and his devotion to a life beyond their understanding seemed to fill the hall. For a moment the room was still, as if the world itself were waiting. Finally, the intruders backed away, unsure how to challenge a human whose care for another being seemed stronger than their own fear. Kale returned to Lyria's side and continued the ritual, letting both human warmth and Elythian crystal energy flow gently into her. The palace wall shimmered, soft music-like vibrations filling the air. Lyria's fingers twitched more noticeably, and a faint smile seemed to brush across her lips. The elder attendants whispered among themselves, their doubts fading. "It is working," one said softly. "The human reaches her in ways we cannot." Kale nodded, feeling the truth of her words. Awakening her soul required more than machines or medicines. It required courage, patience, and a willingness to touch life with care and empathy. By the time the moons hung high in the sky, Lyria's chest rose steadily, her breath stronger and more even. Kale continued to speak softly, letting words of hope, warmth, and courage fill the quiet hall. He had crossed the threshold of life and soul, reaching into the place no one else could touch. Somewhere deep within, Lyria's soul responded to him. It was still fragile, but it stirred with a spark of recognition, a tiny flicker that promised life. Kale leaned close, speaking gently. "You are not alone," he said. "You are safe. You are alive. You can come back fully." He felt a faint pulse under his hand, a sign that the miracle he hoped for was beginning to unfold. The palace seemed to sigh in relief, as if acknowledging that life had begun to return. And in the quiet glow of Alithia's crystal halls, Lyria's soul stirred, reaching toward the warmth and courage of the human who refused to give up, a spark growing steadily, ready to awaken. The palace felt alive in a way it had not for centuries. The soft hum of crystal energy pulsed gently through the halls, echoing the growing rhythm of Lyria's own life. Kale sat beside her, his hand resting lightly near hers. Every flicker of movement, every small twitch of her fingers filled him with hope. This was no longer just a delicate ritual. It was a bridge forming between two worlds, a fragile bond growing stronger with each passing hour. Lyria's eyelids lifted slowly, revealing pale eyes that blinked against the soft glow of the crystal halls. At first they were unfocused, like a dreamer waking from a long sleep. But Kale did not pull back. He kept his voice soft, calm, and steady. "You are here," he whispered. "You are safe. You are alive." The words seemed to reach her deep inside, stirring a flicker of recognition, a spark of understanding. The attendants held their breath, watching in awe. No human had ever succeeded in reaching the princess this far. Many had tried and failed, but Kale had persevered, not through force or power, but through patience and unwavering care. His presence was a quiet strength, and it resonated with something inside Lyria that no machine, no medicine could touch. Slowly, Lyria moved her hand, her fingers brushing against Kale's lightly. The contact was gentle, almost shy, but it carried meaning. Her soul, once fading and fragile, responded with warmth. Kale smiled softly, careful not to startle her. "You are stronger than you know," he said. "And you are not alone. I am here with you." The words, simple as they were, seemed to ease something deep inside her, loosening the weight that had held her spirit captive. As the day passed, Lyria's awareness grew. She listened to Kale's voice and seemed to understand not just his words but his intentions, the care and hope behind them. She tried to speak, a small sound escaping her lips, faint but clear. Kyle leaned closer, encouraging without pressure. "It is all right," he said softly. "Take your time. Let your voice return when you are ready." Slowly, she whispered a single word, a name perhaps, or a sound from memory, and it felt like a miracle to those who heard it. The palace attendants exchanged amazed glances. "She is responding," one whispered. "She remembers something. She is aware of life again." Even the elder who had been cautious now nodded, a mixture of relief and wonder in her eyes. Kale felt the truth of their words. Lyria's soul was awakening, her spirit responding to patience, care, and the courage of a human who refused to give up. Night fell, and Kale continued his gentle work. He held her hand lightly, letting warmth flow between them, and spoke softly about the world beyond the palace. He told her of Earth, its rivers, forests, and oceans, of laughter and music, of courage and kindness. Each word was a thread weaving her soul back into life, encouraging recognition and hope. Lyria's chest rose steadily now, her breath deepening, her fingers flexing with life. A sudden sound echoed through the palace, a distant clatter, a warning that rival factions might attempt interference. Kale did not panic. He rose slowly, still holding her hand, his presence steady and protective. "Stay calm," he whispered. "Nothing will harm you now. I am here." The intruders did not appear. As if sensing the human's unwavering determination, Kale's calm courage had created a shield around her, protecting her not with weapons but with presence and care. By the next morning, Lyria's eyes were fully open. She gazed at Kale with wonder and a flicker of understanding. Her voice returned in fragments, small words that formed slowly but deliberately. "Life here?" she asked, her tone filled with curiosity and cautious awe. Kale nodded, smiling gently. "Yes," he said. "Life is here and you are part of it. You have returned." The attendants watched silently, their doubts replaced with awe. The human had done what Alethians believed impossible. He had reached a fading soul and rekindled it, not with force or technology, but with courage, patience, and care. Lyria's awakening was not just personal. It was a miracle that had begun to heal the palace, the energy of her life spreading through the crystals and halls like sunlight through a misty morning. Kyle knelt beside her, letting her take his hand in hers. "You have always been strong," he said. "Now you see the world again. You can choose, you can live, and you can inspire your people once more." Lyria's gaze softened, and for the first time, a hint of a smile curved her lips. It was small, fragile, but full of meaning. Her soul was returning to life, and with it the hope of Ilithia. And in that moment the palace no longer felt silent. Life had returned, fragile but undeniable, carried in the soul of a princess who had been touched by a human who refused to give up. The miracle had begun, and every heart in the room, human and alien alike, felt the warmth of hope shining once again. The light in the palace had changed. Where there had been shadows and silence, warmth now filled the halls. Lyria moved slowly, her body stronger than it had been in years, yet every step carried a careful grace. Kyle walked beside her, offering steady support, but he did not rush her. Her soul had returned, but trust and confidence took time to grow. Every movement, every word she spoke reflected a careful rediscovery of life and the world around her. The attendants watched in quiet amazement. They had seen the impossible happen, the fading princess awakening through the care and courage of a human. Yet the wonder was not only in her recovery but in the subtle change of spirit it brought. Lyria's eyes now held a brightness that had been absent for so long, a spark of life and curiosity. She began to speak to her people in small, gentle ways, testing the world outside her inner silence. Kale listened, encouraging her with quiet words and smiles. Together, they walked through the palace gardens, where crystals caught the light of Ilithia's twin moons, scattering colors across the ground like living rainbows. Lyria's fingers brushed against flowers that had once wilted under the weight of despair. "They survived," she whispered, astonished. "Even here life returns." Kale nodded. "Life is stubborn," he said, "and it grows stronger when hope is near." She looked at him, her gaze softening. For the first time she realized the depth of his care, the strength of his presence that had reached her soul. Over the next days, Kyle helped her understand the ways humans think and feel, teaching her about courage, patience, and empathy. He showed her that life was more than survival. As connection, laughter, and the willingness to take risks for others. Lyria absorbed these lessons quickly, her mind opening like a flower to sunlight. She began to speak to her people, sharing the stories Kale had told her, teaching them that hope and courage could overcome even the darkest despair. The palace attendants began to notice a change in themselves as well. They had spent years in fear and caution, waiting for life to return naturally. Yet now, guided by Kyle and Lyria, they began to act, planting new gardens, repairing broken crystal structures, and offering words of comfort to one another. The halls that had once been silent and heavy now carried laughter and conversation. Ilithia itself seemed to breathe again, as though the awakening of the princess had restored life to the land. One evening, Kale and Lyria walked to a high balcony overlooking the city. The pale mist was lifting, revealing the rooftops and towers bathed in soft light. Lyria turned to Kale, her eyes bright with awe. "I had forgotten how the world looked," she said. "How beautiful it can be." Kyle smiled. "You helped me see that too," he replied. "You reminded me why hope matters, why we must keep going even when it seems impossible." For the first time, Lyria reached for Kale's hand, holding it firmly yet gently. She had come to trust him, not just as a savior but as a companion. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for not giving up on me." Kale squeezed her hand lightly. "It was never just about saving you," he said. "It was about believing in life, in you, and in the possibility of hope." Her lips curved into a smile, small but radiant, as if her soul itself were smiling. Word of her recovery spread quickly through the city. Ilithians from all corners came to see their princess, amazed at the change in her spirit. They listened to her speak of courage, life, and unity, and they began to rebuild their own lives with renewed energy. Lyria's words were gentle but firm, inspired by Kale's lessons. She encouraged forgiveness, understanding, and cooperation, bringing together factions that had long been divided. Kale remained by her side, a quiet guide and companion, never overshadowing her but always supporting her growth. Together they began planning for the future of Ilithia. combining the wisdom of her people with the courage and determination of humans. It was a partnership built not on power but on trust, respect, and the shared desire to bring life and hope to a world that had almost been lost. At night, as Ilithia's twin moons rose high in the sky, Lyria stood on the balcony with Kyle. She looked out at the city below, alive with movement and color, and then turned to him. "I never thought I would feel this alive again," she said, her voice steady and clear. "You showed me what life could be, and I will carry it forward for my people." Kyle smiled. "And you will," he said. "Together we will help Ilithia thrive, and the world will remember that life can return even from the darkest place." In that moment, Ilithia was no longer silent. It was alive with possibility, with hope, and with the quiet triumph of a human who had touched a fading soul and helped it shine again. And the bond between Kale and Lyria, forged through courage and care, promised a future filled with life, trust, and endless possibilities. The morning light bathed Ilithia in a golden glow. The mist lifted completely, and the city sparkled as if celebrating a new beginning. Lyria walked through the palace gardens, her steps confident and steady, her eyes alive with curiosity and joy. Flowers bloomed in vibrant colors, streams of water shimmered in the sunlight, and the soft hum of crystal energy filled the air. Life had returned in ways no one had imagined possible, and Lyria felt it deeply in her soul. Kale walked beside her, watching her movements with quiet pride. He had witnessed the transformation, not only of her body but of her spirit. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more compassionate with each passing day. And though the bond between them had started as one of care and hope, it had deepened into something unspoken yet undeniable: trust, respect, and a connection that went beyond words. The palace attendants moved about with purpose and energy, repairing broken structures, planting new gardens, and preparing for visitors who came from all corners of Ilithia. The people had heard the story of the human who had touched the fading soul of their princess and rekindled life itself. Their fear and suspicion had turned to awe and gratitude, and they were eager to embrace the hope she now carried. Lyria paused on a terrace overlooking the city, her gaze stretching to the distant towers and streets alive with movement. "I never thought I would see this again," she said softly, almost to herself. "Life thriving again." Kale placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You brought it back," he said. "I only helped you see it. It was always your strength, your courage, and your hope that made this possible." She looked at him, her eyes shining, and nodded. "Together, then," she said, "we can help Ilithia rebuild, not just the city, but the hearts of our people." As the day progressed, leaders from different factions approached the palace. They had long been divided by fear, rivalry, and misunderstanding. Yet when they saw Lyria, standing tall and serene, accompanied by the human who had saved her, they felt something shift within themselves. They listened as she spoke of unity, of compassion, and of hope. They saw that life had returned not through force or power, but through courage, patience, and trust. Slowly their old enmities softened. Conversations that once carried threats now carried ideas, plans, and cooperation. Kale stood beside her, quietly offering guidance when needed, but letting her take the lead. He understood that her people needed her to shine fully, to become the leader she was always meant to be. Lyria spoke with calm authority, encouraging cooperation, innovation, and care for one another. She shared the lessons Kale had taught her, the value of persistence, empathy, and courage. Her words were gentle yet powerful, leaving everyone in the palace and beyond inspired. By evening, the city of Ilithia glowed with life. The gardens bloomed, the crystal towers reflected the colors of the setting sun, and laughter and music drifted through the streets. The palace halls, once quiet and solemn, now echoed with conversations, the footsteps of workers, and the sound of life restored. The miracle of the princess's awakening had not only healed her soul, but had restored hope to an entire world. On the highest balcony of the palace, Lyria turned to Kale. "You risked so much for me," she said, her voice steady and sincere. "Not just your life, but your heart. How can I ever thank you?" Kale smiled softly. "You don't need to," he said. "Seeing you alive, seeing Ilithia alive again, that is all the thanks I need." She reached for his hand and held it firmly. "Then stay with me," she said. "Not as a guide, but as a partner. Together we can protect this world and the life we have restored." Kyle's heart warmed at her words. He had come to Alithia to save a soul, but in the process, he had found purpose, friendship, and something deeper, something rare and precious. That night, under the twin moons, Lyria and Kale walked through the gardens, the soft glow of crystal lights guiding their steps. The air was filled with the hum of life, the laughter of attendants, and the soft murmur of Alithians expressing gratitude and joy. Alithia was alive, thriving, and full of hope. The once fading princess now radiated strength, warmth, and courage, her soul fully awakened. Kyle looked at her, admiration and respect shining in his eyes. "You are remarkable," he said, "not just for surviving, but for inspiring everyone around you." Lyria smiled, her fingers brushing his hand. "And you," she said, "taught me to believe in life again. You touched my soul in ways I cannot forget." The palace stood as a beacon, not just for Alithia, but for other worlds that would hear of the miracle. A human had crossed the stars, reached a fading soul, and rekindled hope. That act of courage, care, and empathy reminded everyone that life was precious. That hope could overcome despair, and that the human spirit was a force capable of miracles. And as Lyria and Kale stood together, watching the moonlight shimmer across the crystal towers, Alithia breathed fully once more. Life, hope, and unity had returned, carried on the bond of a human who refused to give up and a princess who dared to awaken. The miracle would be remembered for generations, a story of courage, trust, and the enduring power of compassion.